Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. This is one of the issues that doesn't always bring a lot of joy, but it's very important. And I want to also thank the members of the task force. One of the opening statements that I have for this as I was getting ready was there truly is no special interest group that drives the children in Minnesota that are in the child maltreatment system. And because of that, I think if you look around, you see the bipartisanship, and you also see the fact that to be here in this committee and to be part of this issue, you really have to care. And there is no politics in this. These are children that are in some of the worst situations you can imagine. They're the children that are going to grow up into a future that is based on what they were provided with in a foundation in their early years. So for us to pay attention to that, for us to get attention to that down here at the Capitol is sometimes very, very difficult. And I have my utmost gratitude to the people around me that are here. We were able to release our report, our implementation of the child protection laws in Minnesota on Monday. And the work that has come there has been extraordinary. The biggest thing that I will say about this report is it's simply a milestone. It simply points to the fact that we have much more work to do. We have to continue on this road. If you look at the 2014 report released by Department of Human Services, we had another 604 children placed in out-of-home placement. We had over 70,000 maltreatment abuse reports, and 77% of alleged abusers are still biological parents. I think those are numbers that are unacceptable, and they're numbers that we have to continue to work very, very hard to reverse. And the last comment that I'll make before I'll turn it over to my colleagues is this is one of our biggest economic game changers. We still have way too many children of color in the system. We have way too many Native Americans, and we have these children who are fighting for survival and then academic success and prosperity later in life. And if we don't address this now and we don't continue to push on this, those children will suffer. And so that's what I have. I'm very proud of the report that we have produced. I'm very proud of what we put together. And I'm proud to be surrounded by folks that truly care about this issue, even though there is no political and lobbyist money flowing in for it. This is truly from our heart. So with that, Senator Rosen. Yes. Oh, sure. Let me introduce them. We have, on my far right, we have Representative Peggy Bennett, Senator Julie Rosen, Representative Joel Mullery, and Senator Hayden. And who's not here today, and I'm sorry, I'm Representative Ron Krisha. Who's not here today is my co-chair, Senator Kathy Sharon. Who else are we missing?
Carla Nelson.
Senator Carla Nelson and Representative Tom Manzels. Did I miss anybody?
I don't think
so. Thank you. Senator Rosen, I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll let everyone make a comment.
Cool. Well, thank you. As our chair said, Representative Krisha, that this is probably one of the most important task force at the Capitol. I do believe that. And I would again like to just circle back and thank the governor for number one, forming the governor's task force on child protection back in 2014, which Representative Krisha, Representative Mullery, Senator Sharon, and myself served on with a large number of stakeholders, and that's where we developed the 93 recommendations to turn this ship around and make sure that we reach our mission, which is the health and safety is the primary goal and objective for our children. That is the mission, that our number one goal. And so we have a tremendous amount of work to do because we still know that there are children such as Eric Dean, who really instigated a lot of the work here at the Capitol because of that incident and that poor mishap. The system failed, he slipped through the cracks, and we all probably have something like that in our districts that we can point to. So our mission is to continue on these recommendations. I do believe with the work groups that have been formed, the intake and screening response path guideline group, the professional development group, the child fatality and near fatality group, and the recommendations of the implementation planning group, they have come out with very good agenda that they're working with the department. And I'd like to thank the Department of Human Services too, the Children and Family Services, Jim Koppel. They have done an outstanding job also. But I will tell you, and I will stand here and say, you will see us here again next year, because we are not going to give up until we make sure that all of our vulnerable children are taken care of, and that their health and safety is their number one concern, our number one concern. With that, I will turn it over to Representative Mulray.
Yep, thank you. Eric Dean didn't instigate it. I don't think that's what you meant.
No.
But when we came to this with the governor's task force, it was really eye-opening as to what was going on, and we found a huge number of systemic impediments to really protecting children. There was a lot of protection of everything else, and these were built-in procedures even. And so we really had to start at the top, and fortunately, Commissioner Jessen at the time really took it seriously, and she appointed Jim Koppel, who I know way back when he was head of the Children's Defense Fund. He has really taken this seriously, and at the top level, the state level, we think that they are really changing things, and that these will have a great effect on both ends of the spectrum, where as far as children, the new procedures that are coming out of DHS are going to actually really protect the safety of children and the brain development and success for the child in the long run. At the same time, he's being careful that we also look at preserving the families as much as we can with services, and also protecting the cultural heritage of kids and their families. The problem is things don't change. This is like an ocean liner you don't turn it around on a dime. And things at the local level are going to take a while, so that on a case-by-case basis we actually see what's happening and that the child is being protected. But I think we're on a great start here. The state level is really coming through, and it's starting to filter down to the local level. So I see the future as really bright for Minnesota kids. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thank you guys for being here again. I also want to say thanks to not only my colleagues here who really took this issue seriously, but also the department, but also our local government partners. As many of you know, and as you understand this, the implementation of this strategy is typically at the county level, or is at the county level, and the county spend a tremendous amount of time and property tax dollars, frankly, on trying to figure out how to make sure that children are safe, as well as the advocates. We've had a whole host of advocates from all communities that have come to tell us kind of what is going on the ground level, and we've heard a lot of testimony. And the last I'll say about that is citizens. We've had a lot of citizen input. We've taken a lot. The chair has been very gracious in making sure that citizens weigh in on this issue too. So with that, I do think we're off to a great start. As many of you know, and it outlines in the report, that a disproportionate amount of these kids are kids of color, African American kids, Native American kids. I happen to have the largest urban Indian housing development in the United States at Little Earth, and there are a lot of kids there that are in harm's way. And so we think that taking a particular look at that, not only keeping them safe, but also getting upstream, figuring out how do we develop the things that the families need in order for these kids not to be in this neglectful situation, or the stresses that happen in families that often the children are the ones that kind of get the brunt of that. So we need to continue to work on those issues, not only from a programmatic side, but I know that my colleagues and I, you guys have seen us really look at this issue of economic disparity and what that means to this issue. So this is not only an all-in terms of the programs and the work that we do to keep children safe, but this is an issue that everyone in the state should be watching, because I do think that it is the bellwether for, if we start to develop better strategies and people start to live in a world that is much more equitable, then I think you'll also start to see the trend drive down. So I do think, my colleagues, this is very bipartisan. This is not something that we, it's like someone told me who's from Greater Minnesota, if we don't deal with this, this is like eating our seed corn. I don't know if I exactly know what that means, but I think I do. That is our future, right? That is our future for all my Greater Minnesota folks. So to that extent, though, we really take it really, really seriously, no matter what part of the state that you represent. So I do want to thank my colleagues to bringing me onto the task force, those that were on the governors, and I think we're going to continue this until we make sure that all Minnesota children are safe.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here on this chilly morning. I just want to say it's been an incredible honor to be on this task force and work with all the people that have been working on this very important subject. I've learned a ton from just meeting with local child protection workers as well as foster parents and things like that. It's also been very heart-wrenching at times, the various subjects that we've had to deal with, and parents and other people that we're dealing with our most precious asset in our state and in our country, and that's our children. And as a former first grade teacher, I understand very well how precious they are as well as how vulnerable children are. And that's exactly why we're here, because kids are vulnerable. I've had students where I've had to use the system and call in for potential abuse. And I've also had students where I found out after the fact, years later, that they had been abused. So it's something that's very important, very critical. I look forward, and we all look forward to working on this more to make sure our children are safe and can grow up into productive and happy adults. So thank you again for being here.
And thank you, everyone, for your comments. Just a quick closing comment, and then we'll take your questions. But something that you heard over and over, and Senator Jeff Hayden called out, the bipartisanship. One thing that I think about on this issue a lot is this is one of the toughest issues, I believe, if not the toughest to deal with down here. On the other hand, politically and from a governance standpoint, if you look at our makeup and how we work in the committee, it's probably one of the most effective that we have, because I've learned a tremendous amount from Senator Hayden and his perspective, as well as my Senator Rosen and Representative Bennett. Our diversity has come together in a way that our conversations take us further. And that doesn't happen a lot down here. And so it's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that we set aside everything and we really focus on these children. And in the process, I think it's made me a better person. It's opened my consciousness up to what can be done. So we'll take your questions.
So as Senator Hayden alluded to, this all costs money, or many of the recommendations cost money. You know, how are you guys getting at that part of it?
I don't know if you want to come, I'll make a quick comment. Let's not jump to the money right away. There's a lot of program changes that we can put in. We can certainly talk about the dollars, but I'll tell you why I don't want to do that. Because around here, as soon as we put a dollar figure on it, it becomes political. And we have a whole lot of changes at the county level. We have a whole lot of reforms at local levels. We have a whole lot of changes in families that need to be done first, that can be done before the state ever puts a budget line together. If you look at the 93 recommendations, there's items with the 24/7 changes that we need to put in place. And those are already accounted for in the last budget. So, I mean, it's fine if you want to jump and try to squeeze a number out of us. I'm just simply not going to go there. But Senator Hayden, I'll leave that to you.
Well, I don't think I disagree with the chair that there are kind of system reforms that we could do. I think in the broader sense that we try to figure out, as we, not just on the issue of the function of child protection and its work, but how do we help to incentivize and help families to kind of reach their full potential. And I think that that's a broader conversation that's really kind of outside of the scope of this work, but I think that it is interconnected. And so I don't have a dollar amount either, but I know that all of us have been trying to figure out how to break down the silos and to have each department and each budget area kind of look and figure out how does the work that they do impact other parts of our budget. And so, though I don't have a dollar, I do think that thinking about what is our criminal justice budget, our HHS budget, our Department of Economic Development, and how can they work seamlessly or much better together in order to help these families. A lot of the folks that are in this system, there is abuse, and we know what that looks like, but there is a lot of neglect that I think the underlying cause is poverty. So we will continue to talk about that.
Gentlemen, what kinds of pieces of legislation may you be introducing this spring?
Go ahead and start.
Okay. I, for one, I'm going to have a bill in, as everybody on the committee knows, we've discussed it, to change it from, we have ombudsmen for each of the 4 racial right now. There's white kids also dying, and I'm going to ask for an office of children's ombudsman. And then within that office, we would have assistant ombudsman under my goal for each of the 4 categories we now have, so that there would be coordination, but also one overall, and it would be expanded to include like foster care and other things outside of just child protection. It would be probably everything within the human services realm, because we've got to protect, I mean, the goal is to protect kids, and you don't take little silos and go at them. So it would be basically to overall protect children, and that would be our goal. That's one piece, I know.
The legislation that we're looking at in the House side, one piece will be foster care reform. One of the things that we've learned in this committee is we need to increase our sphere a little bit to include the foster care system. And a couple of reform ideas that we have there is the interaction between foster care and child care, as well as some regulation changes that we can make to open the foster care up to other homes. And the conversation will come up on equity pay as well. The other thing that I think is important to note on the legislation side is in the budget year last cycle, we did a little over $47.5 million directly to counties with $1.5 million in disparity grants. A large part of what our job will be is to oversee that and to give an advisory role. And so another piece of legislation that I'll be offering is to continue this committee, to keep it moving, because it does need legislative action. And one thing I'll note about this committee, we don't have a budget, and this is mostly our time. So it really is a pure to the issue committee. Anything else you guys have for?
Well, I just think that there is just a little bit of tweaking on the North Star proposal that Representative Crecia talked about in terms of making sure that we have a lot of hard-to-serve children that have had a lot of trauma in their lives, that we made some adjustments that we don't probably have enough placement opportunities, foster homes that are very intensive, that takes a lot of work in order to help these children get the therapy that they need. So I'm hearing from my own county that some of these children have no place to go, and they end up at HCMC. They end up at our safety net hospital because people don't know where to go. They're not, that it would be terrible to send them to the juvenile detention center, but at the same token, they're a little too intensive for families at the level that we give the resources. So we need to just kind of look at those things and review that. I think Representative Mullery talked about his proposal for the ombudsman. We have both kind of been tasked to look at that. I probably would take a slightly different approach. I'm really listening to the community. We do need an ombudsman for all children, but as the report says, there is a disproportionality of kids of color in my district and frankly Representative Mullery's district. So I want us to make sure that we don't demote the idea of ombudsmen in terms of how do they look in communities, but we support and promote them, but also make sure that all children in Minnesota have the representation that they need as their parents go through the process.
I haven't had time to go through the report, but what are some things that you would say already work well within the child protection system here?
Well, and I will let the chair also speak on that, but I do want to say that, just a comment on the previous question, I believe that the more we peeled back the layers on this topic and we jumped into what needs to be done, these 93 recommendations, the more we realized that there is a tremendous amount of work to do, especially around the foster child protection system, the lack of homes in that area, the older children. We've focused on the younger children in the first year, and now the older children. How do we handle that? It's a completely different system. And we've also realized what happens in the metro area and how the counties are serving and their system is much different than what is happening in greater Minnesota. So to kind of circle back on the question of investment and dollars and bills, we have to make sure that we allow the system to work if it's been working properly. Also to give comfort and and guarantee that there will be the money ongoing for these counties, so they make the investments and that they do the grants for the increased staffing and for the system change, and that we do make this a priority and continue to make that investment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chair.
So thank you for your question on what works well. It's a hard question to answer because every situation is unique. What may work well for one family and one child, the next family may not have the same experience. And the reason for that is, as Senator Hayden alluded to, poverty is a big driving factor of this, also substance abuse. At the same time, somebody simply losing their job and coming home and having a bad day could put somebody into this system. So everything is so complicated, but one of the things that we do know what does work is when we get to the family and we get some stability in there and we find a way for the parents to feel good about what they're doing and moving that child along, that moves them on a path to prosperity and academic success. It's very hard to raise children. It's very hard to raise children when you're in survival mode. And one of the things that I've learned is no matter where you are in the state, if you come home and your basic needs aren't there, everything's very, very difficult. And you know, it's hard to imagine what some of these mothers and fathers are going through. And we have to deal with that at a system level, and that's very challenging.